Welcome to the 47th edition of Make Pro Wrestling Majestic again. I am Tiger Height.
And I am Peanut Gallery.
And we finally have a Majestic champion. Mothership won the title after like, what, 2 months of it being vacant?
Something like that.
So, that's kind of exciting. And so, because there are no pay-per-views or anything this week, we wanted to talk about the IWC, the Internet Wrestling Community, because I think it's something that I don't think we've really addressed it on a show, but
no, we have not. But we have addressed some criticisms from the Internet Wrestling community with regards to our supported promotions, and we've addressed that in the past.
But we're gonna do a show on it because I think it's something that a lot of people really need to know. So we have some pictures here for Ryan, for Peanut Gallery, I should say. Now, you're going to talk about the Internet Wrestling community overall.
I'm going to talk about it in a more general sense because I think that it's becoming a little more pronounced, especially in recent years, with the rise of AEW and how well it's been doing as far as, becoming an actual competitor to the WWE in terms of its fan base more likely than not. We've talked about the differences. They're different products, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
But ultimately, they do reach out to members within the same community.
Right.
And what this has launched into, and I haven't really seen it really ever to this level. I mean, you have always had people who supported, Ring of Honor or Impact Wrestling or, some of these smaller promotions. But really, there hasn't been this level of, it almost seems like warfare between two fan bases because there wasn't a major company that could have competed on the level that All Elite Wrestling has with the WWE.
Since WCW.
Right, but when WCW was a thing, the internet was not what it is today.
Oh, 100%.
So, we have seen, if you go back, there are probably forums where this has occurred, and I can almost guarantee you that has occurred in the past, but we're kind of seeing this, I guess, devolution of the Internet Wrestling community in real time with regards to this. And I think that the pandemic has exacerbated a lot of things.
I think so too.
I think that, especially with the WWE's track record over the past 2 years and the changes that they have made and the releases that have been done, coinciding with AEW's rise, giving these wrestlers a place to work, giving them contracts, signing new people. Seems like there's a fucking debut every single week within AEW. But more generally, I think that there are groups of fans that are supporters of New Japan Pro Wrestling. There are groups of supporters that are fans of Ring of Honor or of Impact Wrestling or some of these other smaller promotions.
Right.
But what I want to talking about more broadly is going to be the war going on between All Elite Wrestling and WWE.
Because those are the two most vocal. Those are the two most vocal fan bases right now in American wrestling.
Yes.
And you can say whatever you want, but that Ring of Honor fan base is not there. The Impact Wrestling is not there. And even within our own, albeit small subsect of the community, those are the ones that get the most attention.
Right.
Are WWE and AEW.
So let's talk about the two sides of this war. On side number one, and then I have side number two on this next on the next slide as well. But let's talk about the two factions. There are two factions. There's the WWE faction, and then there's the AEW faction. The WWE faction is more. So I'm talking about the pros, but like how they're pro WWE and how they're anti AEW, and then I'll talk about AEW and how they're they're pro AEW and anti WWE.
Right. In my opinion,
and I'm going to give you a very basic idea of what each fan group is touting when it comes to their dislike for a certain promotion or their like for another promotion.
Right.
So with AEW fans dislike the WWE largely because the product isn't what appeals to them. They yearn for a certain era of wrestling that AEW seems to provide a better gateway to.
Right. Or they have a certain style that they really like.
Yeah, but they have a certain style of wrestling that they like that WWE does not offer. They offer certain types of matches that WWE does not offer.
And it's something different than WWE.
Right, it is.
And people will literally just gravitate towards it because it's a big stage professional wrestling company.
Yes.
That's not WWE.
Right. And they're anti-WWE because WWE isn't offering them the product.
I mean, to the point of being Venom. Like, it's really bad. It's like,
and,
holy crap.
And, of course, they fall back on a lot of the decisions that WWE and AEW have made in the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the WWE side, you have a WWE fan base that is anti-AEW because they see the history of professional wrestling promotions that try to compete with the WWE that fail.
Right.
WCW, TNA, ECW, they've tried to compete with the WWF, WWE, and NWA has even done that. I mean, there has been a lot of companies that came and went, and WWE seems to stay.
That's the other thing too. I think people will stick with the E because of its longevity.
Yeah, because
they don't want to gravitate towards another promotion and then it go away. It's more of like there are redeeming qualities for both. Peanut Gallery and I are very much I think a very, very large majority that just stay silent and enjoy the product for what it is.
And so...
But we also watch wrestling different than most people because we do this as a job. We watch wrestling and cover it as a job.
Right. And on the pro WWE side is again, there are certain characters and storylines that actually are compelling. And then also you have the subset of it's something where you don't, they're anti like blood and guts sort of thing. I mean, you want to go that direction. That's the direction. So they like the athleticism. They like that kind of stuff. They like the characters. They like the big stages. They like the colorfulness of it. And there is a group of people that like that. And there are a group of maybe families with kids that would rather, if they want to introduce them to professional wrestling, you do it with WWE over AEW.
And also a lot of these parents that are introducing them to that, their parents probably introduced them to professional wrestling by going to a WWE show. Right, exactly.
Going to WWF events. So those are the two factions, I guess, if you want to call
those are the two major factions. New Japan was there at one point, but they really sort of fizzled for the most part in the world of professional wrestling here in America.
Right.
I'll be honest with you.
And I'm going to talk about a couple of other factors as well if we move on to the next. If you want to move,
this is they're saying about Keith Lee because that's the biggest example.
So let's talk about a very recent example of this warfare going on and talking about Keith Lee. And WWE and AEW fans have been just bashing each other over the throat for the past 3 weeks because of Keith Lee.
Right. Well, because Keith Lee is an example of that, but they did it for everybody.
They did.
And with Keith Lee, the situation with Keith Lee, I think, is a bit different because, number one, they just can't put everybody in the main title picture.
Right.
And Adam Cole, for example, went for the AEW World Champion. Yeah, there might have been some pull, but at the same time, he also left WWE with a big amount of momentum where Keith Lee fizzled.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about that, about how the fans have reacted to the situation. There are people who are in support of AEW's usage of these wrestlers.
Right.
And there's merit to that. There absolutely is merit to that. Mm-hmm. At the same time, though, I can see where WWE fans are I guess crowing on this because of the way that they perceive Keith Lee's usage.
People bitched and moaned about the treatment of Keith Lee in WWE,
right?
And they're like, "Oh, it's the same exact thing in AEW." My thing with AEW is, I think because Keith Lee just got married, he had the health issues that I think they're really trying to play it cool as it relates to Keith Lee. They're slowly integrating him into the product instead of just shoehorning him in immediately. Mm-hmm. Now, could there be some pull with your Adam Cole's? Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. He's friends with some of the executives, and he brought over Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly, not before with Bobby Fish, but Kyle O'Reilly after. Mm-hmm. So there's obviously that pull there, but with Keith Lee, they're just being careful.
Yes.
And I think that's important to think about. It's not because, oh, he's an afterthought immediately. It's you have to go with the flow. Right. You have to go with the punches, and they're just not doing that.
Right. So that's just one of many different examples of wrestlers that are kind of being put.
Oh, and this is another Keith Lee example.
Right. And so there's that, and like I said, I think the biggest issue is just the wrestlers. We're seeing some genuine competition between two wrestling promotions, and wrestlers now have an option of where they want
and they
to go.
They don't have to go overseas to get those options either if they don't want to.
Right, exactly. And so if it existed, and if all this existed in the 90s, we would see all of this happening in the 90s as well.
It would be the same exact thing, because keep in mind of when Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Hulk Hogan went over from WWE to WCW, they did something very different with them. Yep. It's like, well, where is your clout there? They changed their names, they changed their appearance, they changed their likeness, they did a lot of that, and people would still bitch about it.
Right. And everyone's taking a side on this. Even journalists are taking a side on this. You got what culture or what culture, as this person derogatorily calls them, talking about AEW in a positive fashion. I've seen this a lot with so-called wrestling journalists. They're starting to get onto this fan train.
Yep.
And I see myself as someone who is completely and totally unbiased towards either company.
We are unbiased towards either company. We know if something is good with the E, we tell you guys if something is good with the E. Mm-hmm. Sometimes with pay-per-views, especially with pay-per-views as WWE, they usually knock it out of the park.
Right.
And then with the regular shows, they slump. It happens. And then AEW, we even talked about that with the Revolution review. We talked about the pattern that we're starting to see with AEW, because now we have enough, and now we're starting to see some cracks forming in certain aspects of AEW. But you can say that about every single company. Impact Wrestling, I've lambasted them about being boring for the last couple of weeks, because they have been. Yeah. They have a great roster, but yet this Honor No More thing is dominating. And it's like, okay, we get it. We hear the Honor No More theme song like 3 times a show. It's an hour-long show, and they're just taking over. It's really annoying.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm getting at, too, because this is what I'm starting to see now within even the journalistic side.
It's not literally impossible to not like AEW. It's actually fairly easy to not like AEW.
There are a lot of people that don't like AEW, and we talked about that.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about Dave Meltzer, because
Dave Meltzer is very guilty of this. He's very guilty of his bias towards AEW.
Yep.
And you have to wonder if he's just being paid. As much as I hate saying that.
Right.
It just seems like the journalistic integrity has gone downhill with regards to...
And we've seen this over the last 5-6 years. I've seen it personally. I know Peanut Gallery's seen it personally. I used to listen to the Brian and Vinny show all the time.
Yeah.
And now it's really hard to do that, because all they do is deep throat AEW and say that everything about WWE is bad.
Right.
Like, literally every single thing. And it's like, that's not it. You're missing the point.
Right.
They're not targeting the same audience.
Right.
You cannot compare them.
They're targeting the hardcore fans, and the hardcore fans of AEW like to listen to how great AEW is.
Right. You don't see
WWE wrestlers don't. WWE fans.
They're casuals.
More or less are more casual. They don't listen to podcasts like that. But you've got this situation now where they're being called out on their own bullshit.
Right.
And so this is as much a criticism of the journalistic integrity of the pro wrestling.
I think
letters,
the
news sites as anything else.
I think the of how we're seeing the pro wrestling journalism community is almost feeding that derisiveness towards the internet wrestling community, where it's like, okay, like I said, this is a very vocal minority that's like this, but we're seeing this within people that look to these people for journalistic integrity, and you're not really seeing that anymore. I mean, it's still there, but it's not as much as it has been.
Right.
You know?
And kind of I guess bookending this whole thing, you know, we have again a situation where there are two legitimate competing organizations,
at least in North American wrestling,
in North America, that are involved in professional wrestling. I don't want to call them pro wrestling companies because we've talked about how WWE is not a pro wrestling company.
They're an entertainment conglomerate.
But they are two products with very, very different styles of professional wrestling,
and also very different means to the end.
Right. With
WWE is looking for the entertainment aspect of it, so big pageantry, state of the art development, stuff like that. Do they do it all the time? No, but because they just happen to do professional wrestling, they put that in there with AEW, which is they still have the production, but it's not necessarily the main focus.
Right.
And it has never been, and it never will be.
Right.
But WWE, it's all about that. They want those. And I'm sorry, when you talk about pop culture, WWE is the product.
Right. So you know, kind of going back to what my point is that these factions are kind of feeding into each other. And I know that there are people that they just sit there and they troll to get attention. And this happens everywhere.
Right.
Everywhere. Every community has this. Mm-hmm. But I've seen this toxicity kind of increase within the pro wrestling community, and and where my concern lies is in the fact that the journalistic integrity of some of these so-called journalists, these podcasters, these YouTube channels, that I don't know if they pride themselves on trying to be as unbiased as possible. They're starting to show their bias.
Yep.
They're starting to show that they are gravitating towards one particular side or the other, and there's no redeeming that. The integrity. So you want to make pro wrestling majestic again? Let's start with making sure that the damn people who are writing the news and getting the information out to us are not biased.
Right. And that's the biggest thing right now is we, Peanut Gallery and I, we're not the biggest YouTubers in the world by a mile, and we're not the biggest podcasters by a mile, but what we try to do is give you guys the information that really is unbiased.
Right.
I mean, you and I enjoy professional wrestling in every company in a different aspect.
Right.
We like AEW because it is a legitimate competitor to WWE, which generally feeds better product.
But neither of those two are my favorite products.
I don't really have a favorite product.
Right.
I have a love for each company in a different way. I go to WWE because everything is readily available, from their media to everything, and also you just can't beat their production.
But let's not talk about your personal opinions with what I mean. We can talk about that in the next segment. I was just giving a very broad overview.
Well, just keep in mind, people, albeit small, do feed us. We are part of the internet wrestling community. And trying to say, what do you like about this company is where it is. I like going to smaller shows instead of bigger shows.
Right.
I like watching this for this reason. And that is important. And to continue to be not biased is that.
Right.
And criticizing an AEW right now is almost sacrilegious.
Right,
or
it is.
What I'm going to be talking about, which is going to be within the realm of Make Pro Wrestling Majestic again, and formerly Majestic Productions. So that will be kind of where we're going, but that will be my discussion.
Right. So when we come back, let's dive right into that.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we're going to go into my part, which is the whole thing of what I'm seeing, at least within mine. Now, the whole thing about Make Pro Wrestling Majestic again and Tiger Trump obviously is going to get eyeballs on there. I think 99.9% of the internet wrestling community understand
that it is parody.
It's parody. It's parody and it's fun.
Event.
Yeah. When I do the live tweets for the pay-per-views, I do it in a very Trump-esque thing. Why? Because it's fun and people get it and people have a laugh.
Right.
And we do get, wrestlers saying, that's really funny. It's like most people get it.
Right.
But we do get those people who don't. our two primary media outlets, because we're everywhere. If you're listening to us or watching us, we have the YouTube and we have the TikTok, which generally gets the most attention. And also they have the comment section where you really don't on like Spotify and stuff. So generally that's what I look at because I'm the one who generally runs this channel or the channels. And I get a couple of different things. Usually, this one is different, and I want to talk about this because we do get a lot of people claiming to be relatives of certain wrestlers and taking offense to it. Nothing really here was there. Well, number one, except for the spelling of offended, A-F-F-E-N-E-N-D-E-D. But the thing is that, and I think this really illustrates, is that people, and especially with professional wrestling, there is a totally other level of fan base when it comes to professional wrestling that no other sport, no other entertainment company, and no other conglomerate of any kind has.
You're not going to get that with, like, I don't think UFC is going to do that. I don't think
football.
You do get fanatic fan bases, but remember the difference is that this is entertainment. This is scripted. This is not really a sport.
Right. It's simulated combat. And there are obviously major people who like it. I will say, especially with the MMA fan base, their journalistic integrity is generally okay, especially with like Ariel Helwani, who is the Dave Meltzer. He's very not biased, and I really enjoy that about him, which is why I listen to him. And even though he doesn't talk about it, Joe Rogan is attached to it because he is a part of that community. He's not a journalist, but he has that. He has his enormous fucking podcast. But this is whatever. I mean, we get death threats. We get. People have doxed us. People have shown up at our place before in the past, years and years ago. I'm usually not a big person that cares. I mean, when you put yourself out there like this, you have to expect that people are going to go against it. And this was a discussion that Peanut Gallery and I had before we even did this. Like, this most likely will happen at some point in time. And it's like, whatever. Very inoffensive. I don't generally care. I mean, I do because I like the feedback.
We don't really respond to comments. We don't.
I do in some cases when people are getting a little too aggressive. Generally, I don't care. Or if something blows up, I just don't have the time. So that one was kind of there. This one I really like because we do get quite a bit of this, and I know it's kind of hard to see this, but this person is giving us a legitimate criticism of where to go. This particular individual wants reviewers to talk about more of the storytelling aspect of rivalries, maybe not necessarily just that.
Which is what I try to do.
We're trying to. Well, which is why we're trying to make Pro Wrestling Majestic again, because the ground floor on it are the storylines.
The storylines and rivalries. And this is where I give a lot of criticism to a lot of different wrestling companies. A lot of different wrestling companies, not just WWE, but every single wrestling company has good storylines and has bad storylines.
Now, obviously, not all of them can be the best storyline in the world.
Someone has to be at the bottom.
And the whole thing about wrestling is not real. I hate that. I do.
We know that. I know. Kayfabe is dead. We know that wrestling is not. Wrestling is real, but it's simulation. It's not that it's not real because these are athletes. They get hurt.
Big E leaned on his head and broke his freaking neck. If you think that's not real, that's real.
It is simulated.
It's simulated. It's simulated combat.
It is combat with a predetermined outcome, and we have known, if you're a real wrestling fan, and you will have known this for at least the last couple of decades up to this point.
If you haven't figured it out at this point, then you either have just started watching wrestling or you're really ignorant about it.
And people like to be as ignorant, and it's like, oh, the internet ruined kayfabe. No, kayfabe was ruined before the internet.
Do you realize that kayfabe started around Toots Mont's era? Like, Toots Mont was the one person who brought predetermined winners to this. You know why? Because with Olympic wrestling is different, but professional wrestling before the Toots Mont era, like the George Hackenschmidt, they were legitimate shoot combat. And guess what? The sport was dying. And Toots Mont's idea of having predetermined winners and having the big flashy moves saved the product. And We understand that now. I don't know why this is always such a weird criticism. It's like, wrestling is not real. Okay, and I still enjoy it.
Right. So let's move on to something else, perhaps, that we see.
Oh, yeah. So TikTok is generally one that
TikTok is toxic. I'm not even on TikTok. Don't
I
try
do,
and look for me on TikTok.
Right. I do the TikTok.
Right.
That's generally my thing. It's really easy to do.
Right.
But especially with people trying to... I don't know what it is about this bitch, because I was right, by the way. She sucks. Is Nikita Lyons.
Let's talk about the Nikita Lyons.
So this is just generally what it is. Usually...
So give us a little backstory into what this was. This was that one match, right?
It was her debut match.
Where she did the splits and everyone was oogling over her because of her backside.
Right. And it's like...
her caboose.
Right. And it's like... Okay, if that was it, then why isn't she wrestling more? She has not wrestled since her debut match.
Right, because she's not good.
I watch it every single week. Every single week, I watch NXT, and she has not appeared, wrestled, anything other than backstage segments where she is now in a program with Lash Legend.
Right. And again, I think that the big reason for this is because of the way in which this match was performed at the very end. And,
right.
And this has also been blowing up on the internet wrestling community for the past couple. Ever since that match happened, it still occurs.
Right. And actually, there are more people now. Now, this is like a long time ago. I took these screenshots, but look at the date. 2/24.
Yeah.
You realize that was almost a month ago. And I did this review the day after she had made her debut. And she has not wrestled since.
And if you're a real wrestling, if you are really unbiased, you know why. She wasn't very good. I watched the match too. She just wasn't that good.
Yeah, it was stilted. And guess what? As people who pride ourselves with being unbiased, I just call it right down the middle. Yeah. I tell you exactly how it is. If it was good, I would have told you Nikita Lyons is the next big thing, but she right now is not.
Right.
She has some athleticism. She has a presence about her.
Right.
I'll at least give her that, but she needs more experience.
Right.
And people with this white knighting shit is almost a perfect illustration on the fan base of professional wrestling.
Right.
As
it's
a
good,
whole.
It's a good snapshot.
It is. It really is. Now, obviously, there were a lot of people who didn't like it, and they tried to attack me, personally from wearing the sunglasses and all of that, but I'm not, once again, I'm not bothered by it. If I was bothered by it, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Right. If you get bothered, YouTube is not for the faint of heart. Let's put it that way.
Putting yourself out there, period, is not for the faint of heart.
Right.
You're always going to have people who are going to go against you.
Right.
And it's just something that's going to happen. Not everybody is critically beloved across the fucking board.
Right. So let's move on to something else maybe that you've seen. I haven't, because I have seen this.
Okay. I don't have any other pictures.
Oh, you don't?
No, I don't have any other pictures, but because I just generally think that this sort of illustrated the point.
Right.
But I guess we can kind of open up a discussion on that end. When people generally don't like what at least us personally are doing,
they'll do personal ad hominem attacks.
Yeah, they'll absolutely do that. And it's like, I don't necessarily care. And if you're going to be getting into, especially if you're going to be a public figure, you always have to expect to have people that will criticize you. And this is not just indicative of the internet wrestling community, the IWC. This is just indicative of being a public figure in general.
Right.
Peanut Gallery and I are very careful about what we say now.
Right.
And trust me, we've done...
We've said things in the past that do not mention worth repeating, but we improve. We move forward, but
we haven't had a scandal to where it was necessarily fucked up. We've definitely said fucked up things, and I'm sure that you guys will go in there and try to find them and do all that shit like a lot of people do with everybody else. But generally, we don't care. It's like whatever we said, we said.
Right.
And when you are a public figure, you have to be careful. And we're being a lot more careful about what we say nowadays. But people are recognizing us. And it's like, okay, our life, for the most part, you're going to get recognized.
Right.
It's just going to happen.
Right. but I want to go back to talking about this whole, because I think where my biggest gripe is within this whole internet wrestling community is that we are getting competent journalists that, or I guess journalists in general, the people that have access to this information, they're the same people that are being accused of not being biased. And I think that needs to return. I think that unbiased reporting needs to return.
Right, we're not
right down the middle.
Right, we're not reporters.
No.
Like, we're definitely not reporters of any kind.
I would like to report more on the. I mean, that's kind of my personal goal, is to do a little bit more of the reporting with a blog and stuff. Haven't gotten around to it, but I do want to bring that to your attention, because my whole goal is to be as unbiased as possible,
right,
to be as scientific as possible, to call things right down the middle as much as possible.
Right, and we have told you guys forever, if you've followed us, I mean, goddamn, we've been doing this for a long, I mean, at least for me, I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
But we always try to say, if something is good, it's good. Right. And if something is bad, it's bad. And it's only our opinions. Right. At the
end of the day, that's what it is. It's our opinion.
We have a platform. We don't generally have authority because nobody really does.
Right.
But there are some journalists that are very unbiased. I credited a couple of different people for that, and I think there are some journalists even within the professional wrestling realm that are unbiased.
Right.
But they're not the big cheeses anymore.
Right.
You have your Dave Meltzers, who is showing bias.
Oh, yeah.
You have your Brian Alvarez, who is showing bias. And I'm sorry, that's just, once again, that's only personally, that's my opinion. Right. And I think a lot of other people are starting to see that.
Mm-hmm. And then that's what needs to stop.
Yep.
That's what will save the internet wrestling community from tearing each other apart.
They're tearing each other apart for no reason. It's like, oh, Dave Meltzer gave this a 6-star. And?
Yeah, Dave Meltzer star ratings don't even mean very much anymore.
They don't. They just don't. They're a good ground placing, but when you give a ton of AEW matches a 5-star classic whatever, it's like, they're not.
Did you watch the same match that I watched?
Right. It's like, where are people sitting there ranting and raving of how great this match was?
Right.
There aren't. I don't see them. You're the only one. It's like, it's a good match. It's not a 5-star match, but it was a good match.
Yeah.
And we try to be that. That's why we do like the thumbs ups and stuff instead of 5-star. It's like, this was a 2 thumbs up match. It was a really good match. Go out of your way and watch it. We don't say that this was an all-time classic. That means this was a really good match. Go out of your way and watch it.
Right.
Or this one, it was good.
Right.
If you have some time to kill, definitely recommend it. You're going to enjoy it. It was all right. Really, kind of skirting the line of being bad, really bad, horribly bad. Go out of your way and just put your hand in your face.
Right.
So
that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Right.
Just that journalistic integrity piece. And
right. And it's indicative to the internet wrestling community because that's what we feed on. That's what we get our information on, right?
They just feed off of each other like
that. And, competition is there, but I think, and here's a question I think I can pose to you. What if somebody is listening to us and say, what can I do to not be labeled as a part of that? What can I do as a person to maybe enjoy everything in one spot?
Well, the first thing is to I think the most important thing is to just not react to posts on the internet, on Reddit, on anything like that. Now, if you want to be involved in the conversation, I think this really hard when you try. If you want to be truly unbiased and you still want to be involved in the conversation, you're not going to find a lot of people, unfortunately, that will
back you. They will not back you. And I think a lot of people want to be a part of the crowd, but when you want to be unbiased and yet be a part of the crowd, it just can't happen right now.
Right.
Because that whole thing, it's like you got to pick a side. We don't have a side.
Right.
We never have and we never will. We like
it's hard in this day and age to not have a
Yep.
side. It is. It's hard.
Absolutely.
That's not a pro wrestling problem. That's just a life problem.
Right. People want to be a part of a clan, and I think this is that high school cliquey thing on a much different scale.
Yeah.
And that's what the IWC has almost devolved to. Now, I'm seeing a lot more criticisms. I'm seeing a lot more maybe respectful discussions out there that I've seen now, and I think my the YouTube comment section, at least for some of my videos, are showing that, where people are saying, I'm seeing a lot of reviewers not reviewing the storylines. I think that's a great idea. Maybe we can do a smaller segment of some storylines and sort of do a breakdown of it as it's happening now. Maybe it's something we can do. But, I think really what you need to do if you really want to be unbiased is kind of take a step back and understand what you like in professional wrestling. You have to get a ground floor of what you would enjoy as a product. And as soon as you kind of figure that out for the most part, then you will be able to see that quality in all things professional wrestling. And this is everything in general, but professional wrestling is just one of those things because it's so uniquely different that every company has its own flavor and feel. UFC, 2 people get into a cage and fight. But with professional wrestling, there's storyline and characters and the matches themselves and where they are. There's a lot of physical, mental, and strategic optimization about professional wrestling that you really don't get with a lot of other places, So kind of step back and look at it, and if you don't feed into people that criticize you, we talked about this today because it is important to get the message out there. I'm not gonna sit in there and argue with people because I'm not gonna feed into that. Be respectful. Try to start a conversation that opens up the floodgates for whatever throws at you. And just as soon as you understand that, then you will be in a much better position to take it. And really, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. I think I've been doing it for over 10 years. I started this in college. And
I've learned not to respond to messages.
There's a way to respond to them without getting emotionally attached to it. And I think when we started watching wrestling as a profession and doing the show, it's kind of hard in that heart. And it's like I can enjoy it and look at it in a different perspective. So that's just kind of what I would say, to kind of stay unbiased, but yet still enjoy the product for what it is.
And be involved.
And be involved in the community without being divisive, without being toxic. So that's kind of what we had. Peanut Gallery, what are we doing next week?
I don't know. Is there a pay-per-view next week?
There is. So we are going to be talking about the Crockett Cup, because that is Saturday and Sunday. NWA. Once again, a whole other flair, something different, and I love it. I love NWA.
Crockett Cup.
Yep. Usually I don't like tournaments, but we'll see what they do. So if you did enjoy this discussion, let us know in the comments. Start a constructive argument and sort of test it out there. See what happens. We don't block people. We don't delete comments unless it's personal, like IP addresses and shit. We don't generally do that. But kind of look at what it is. Look at comment sections in like WWE and AEW and look at how people talk and understand of where that is and say, what can I do to improve this conversation and become a part of that community? Don't be sucked into the toxic part of it, but start good conversations and you'll get much farther in it. So follow us on all of our social medias. Comment down below here. And as always, be
majestic.